Welcome back to The Why. Walking down the aisle was once considered a cherished rite of passage for young adults, but now marriage rates in the U.S. are at historic lows. In 1949, 79% of households had married couples. Now that number is just 48%. Experts say a lot of factors are driving this dramatic shift. Newsy's Magarino has the story.
They don't throw wedding parties, but some animals have evolved to practice monogamy. Penguins and California mice are among the species that pair off to survive and raise their young. For human beings, marriage is an ancient custom. As far back as 2100 BCE, the Mesopotamian written law, called the Ur-Nammu, laid out marriage rules. Practical needs have driven the desire for marriage for most of human history. Marriage meant sharing food and household tasks and ensuring that children were protected. Religious rules often dictated marriage, or marriage was used to seal alliances between families or even kings and queens. Towards the end of the 18th century, a new reason for marriage in America emerged: L-O-V-E, love.
Look, honey, I love you. I want to marry you.
I love you too, Joe. I don't ever want to be away from you.
By the 1950s, the social pressure to marry was immense. If a woman didn't marry by age 30, she was considered an old maid. If a man wasn't married in middle age, he'd be considered a weirdo. But in the 21st century, marriage has changed yet again. Decades ago, most Americans married early. In 1947, the median age to marry for women and men was 21 and 24 respectively. Now, Americans marry later. The median age is 29 for women and 30 for men. In 1979, among 33 to 44-year-olds, 84% of middle-class people were married, and 82% of higher-income people were. Marriage among higher-income people has remained steady. 80% are married, but only 66% of middle-class people are. Movies like 4 Weddings and a Funeral reflected that cultural change.
And do you think not being married to me might maybe be something you could consider doing for the rest of your life? Do you?
I do.
And fewer Americans now see marriage as important. In 2006, according to Gallup, 54% said it was very important to marry one's life partner, and 25% said it was not important. In 2020, only 38% said it was important, while 36% said it wasn't. As marriage rates have declined, the number of romantic partners living together without getting married, cohabitation, has risen. 3% of adults in 1995 were cohabitating. In 2018, the number was 7%. Same-sex marriages, which weren't legal in all 50 states until 2015, make up fewer than 1% of U.S. marriages. Since the number is small, it doesn't really affect overall marriage trends. So what's driving these changes? One thing we can probably rule out: divorce. Divorce rates in the U.S. have actually fallen since 1980. American attitudes, meanwhile, have steadily moved toward less traditional views. Economics are playing a role, too. A 2017 study found that families living in areas with more income inequality were more likely to have a child before getting married. Regardless of what's driving the decline of marriage, the effects on society have been noticeable, especially for children. In 1979, 86% of children in middle-class families lived with 2 parents, married or not. In 2018, that number was down to 80%. 40% of American children are now born to a cohabitating couple. Single people, meanwhile, are becoming a larger and more vocal demographic in America. Advocates argue that single people face systematic discrimination. They say the government should change the tax code because it currently gives advantages to married couples. Lauren Magarino, Newsy.
To help us understand more on what's happening with marriage trends in the U.S., let's bring in Wendy Manning. She's the co-director of the National Center for Family and Marriage Research. Wendy, welcome to the program.
Thank you for having me.
So let's first start by talking a little bit about the pandemic and its impacts on marriage. We heard, story after story during the pandemic of it's making problems worse for couples. What's your take on that?
The pandemic has had, for some couples, it's probably strengthened their relationships, and for others, it's weakened it. We see increases in relationship conflict that occurred prior to the pandemic and during the pandemic, but we've also seen a number of changes in marriage and divorce patterns during the pandemic.
So let's talk about people who are waiting later in life to get married. The average age now for women is 29. For men, it's 30. It used to be you get married first, but now it's getting your education, setting up your career, then getting married and having kids. What are the trends you're noticing and the effect that that's having on families?
So those trends are exactly on point, that about 3/4 of people who got married have, in any particular year, have lived together before they got married. So very few people, only about 1/4, are walking down the aisle without the benefit of having lived together prior to marriage. So we've seen continual increases in those patterns. And most people want to make sure they're set not only in terms of their relationship, but in terms of their finances and economics before they get married. So that explains some of the delay. But I think, as you point out, people are not waiting to form a relationship. They're just waiting longer to actually get married. So they're living together still in their early 20s. They're just waiting longer to actually get legally married.
So you have a study using marriage and divorce rates from 35 states. Cohabitation is also more popular. I'm interested in what you discovered about all of that.
My study was mainly focused on the United States. I was looking at 20 states in terms of marriage and 35 states in terms of divorce. And so we were able to use administrative data, and that's vital statistics data where people report their marriages and divorces. Every county and state reports those. And they just, and we were able to see that during the pandemic, there were actually declines in the number of marriages, and there were declines in the number of divorces during the pandemic. And so that was, I think, one of the main contributions of our study, was to actually use the most recent real-time data to address those kinds of questions.
So let's talk a little bit about divorce. What do we know about those rates, and how is that impacting families?
So we know that not only do we have declines in marriage in the United States, we're at some of our lowest points in terms of our marriage rate, we also continue to have declining divorce rates. And so a lot of people want to know why is that occurring? And it's mainly because people are probably more selective in terms of who they marry, and they're waiting longer to get married. And so those marriages that do occur are more financially secure and more compatible probably before they enter their marriages. So we see with a declining marriage rate, we also see a declining divorce rate.
So we know the effects of divorce can often be very difficult on kids. What does the research show us of two-parent households and the healthy upbringing of children? And I'm curious to also kind of get your take on this too. Oftentimes divorce, if let's say that home environment is very toxic, parents who are split apart and are happier, that can also have a beneficial impact to kids. What do you notice about that?
Yeah, I think there's evidence that children fare better when their parents are in healthy relationships. Mm-hmm. And if those parents are not healthy in terms of their interactions with one another and interactions with their children, then maybe that family is better off not together. But we also have evidence where some families, if they can just work through their problems, that maybe in terms of economics and having two parents available to parent could benefit children. So it really depends on the nature of the parental relationship and their relationships with their children. And not all families are the same. We have a lot of families that are step-parent families, so they have children from prior relationships, and that adds another form of complexity. And can benefit children in terms of having two parents available, and but also could create some tension in terms of trying to co-parent with parents who aren't living within the household. So there's a lot of mixed evidence, and it just seems like children generally need to have two well-functioning parents in order to fare best.
Okay, Wendy Manning, a lot of good insight there. Thank you for coming on The Why.
Sure, thank you.